Welcome to She is Resilient, a podcast for women on their healing journeys who are ready to start living their most authentic and empowered lives outside of survival mode. I'm your host, Tatiana, trauma and somatic therapist, as well as a holistic coach, and I'm on a mission to help more women heal their nervous systems. Each week, me and my guests are going to get real and vulnerable about the experiences that led us to becoming the empowered and resilient women we are today. You'll leave this podcast with the skills, knowledge, and inspiration to start creating the life you deserve. Because if another woman can do it, so can you. We are back with another episode of She is Resilient. Today we're talking part 1 of trusting your intuition and how trauma can impact your ability to trust your intuition. Now, I don't know if you've seen these posts, but I've come across posts on social media that talk about intuition as being this strong feeling of knowing without the fear or anxiety. And that when you do have this fear and anxiety, then it's probably not your intuition and instead your nervous system in a dysregulated state. And I can understand that, but I don't entirely believe that's true. Because I think that for me, the times where I've trusted my intuition, there was both this feeling of inner knowing and also fear and anxiety. And I don't think that it has to be one or the other because I feel like that's a very black and white way of thinking about things, and feelings are definitely not black or white, right? So you can experience multiple sensations and emotions all at once. And I think that a big part of healing is being able to understand your bodily cues so that you can detect whether it's your intuition or your nervous system reacting as a result of an unresolved wound. So, I want to share with you a couple of experiences with trusting my intuition. That's why there's going to be a part 1 and part 2. Today, I'm sharing one brief experience with you. So, one of my earliest experiences with trusting my intuition was when I was in 7th grade. I was 12 years old in middle school, and at that point in my life, I was still very shy, anxious, and didn't really speak up or use my voice. So, next to my middle school, there was a McDonald's where I would just walk to and wait in the parking lot for my mom to pick me up. At that time, my mom worked 3rd shift. So while we were in school, she would get her sleep in. So it would be very common for my mom to oversleep and forget to pick us up from school. There were times she would show up 30 to 45 minutes late, and I was just used to waiting for her. Also important to note, this was during a time when not all kids had cell phones, so I didn't have a phone to just call my mom when she overslept. I don't think I actually got my first phone until I was 14, so fun fact. So if I wanted to get a hold of my mom, I needed to go back into the school and use the office phone or ask someone to borrow their phone. But usually I would just wait because I knew that my mom would eventually come. So it was one of those days where my mom was running late and I noticed a car drive by with 2 men. One was driving and the other one was in the passenger seat. The one in the passenger seat, in that moment, I felt like he locked his eyes on me, and that immediately made me feel uncomfortable. And they weren't saying anything or doing anything, but just the way that they were looking at me made me feel really uncomfortable. And then they just drove away, and that was that. I didn't really think about it after that. But the following day, my mom was running late again, and I decided to wait inside of the McDonald's. And as I'm walking in, I see the same 2 men that I saw the day before coming out of the McDonald's. And for some reason, I remember choosing to make eye contact with them while continuing to walk in. Once I passed by them, I remember turning around and noticed that again, the man that was in the passenger seat the day before was staring right at me. I remember at that point feeling terrified but I didn't tell anyone because technically nothing happened. So I wasn't really sure what I would even say if I were to tell someone. And because at this point I'd had so many experiences dismissed that even if I did say something, I don't think I even trusted that someone would take me seriously. So I just let it go. So the next day comes, and I remember telling my mom in the morning to not forget to pick me up, and internally begging the universe that she wasn't late. Because at that point, I was really scared to see those men again. I remember feeling like they were watching me, but also felt like I didn't have the evidence to prove that they were. I also remember thinking that maybe I was just overreacting. But at the same time, I've always felt like I was an observant kid. And, even right now, as I'm thinking about it, I feel like a lot of those observant skills that I had were probably not really skills, but really I was just living in a state of hypervigilance, which truly served me at the time because it helped me be very aware of my surroundings, my environment, people's tone of voice, people's body language, their facial expressions, everything. Anyway, later on that day, once school ended, my mom was late again. And usually it was fine, but because of the past couple of days, I was internally panicking. So I remember feeling very, very panicky. So I decided to go right into the McDonald's and ask to use the phone to call my mom. So the person working there said that they couldn't let me borrow the phone. And of course, because I was already super shy, I just said okay, accepted it, and decided to sit by the window and wait for my mom. As I waited for my mom, those two men walk into the McDonald's. And I remember feeling this huge pit in my stomach. One of them, the one that was driving, goes to the counter to order something, and the other one starts walking towards me and asks if he can sit down. Side note, I was the only other person in there before they walked in, so there were plenty of other seats. So when he asked if he could sit down at my table, I say yes, but then I get up and start walking away, internally panicking and also knowing that all of the anxiety and fear I was experiencing the last few days were just confirmed, that I wasn't overreacting. So luckily I saw a classmate and I used that opportunity to just talk to them for a little bit so that I wouldn't be alone. And then the next day comes and I saw them again, but this time they were right in front of the school. So as soon as I walked out of the school building, I saw them. And so as I'm walking out, I knew that they had seen me because one of them had tapped the other to get his attention. And at that point, I knew that I had to say or do something, or else who knows what they could have done. I immediately started running back inside the school and asked the school secretary to use the phone to call my mom. Turns out that my mom was on time that day and she was actually waiting for me at the parking lot where she usually picks me up. So I was on the phone with her and I insisted that she picked me up right in front of the school so that I didn't have to walk to the parking lot. And that's when I ended up telling my mom what I was noticing. And I told her that I felt like those two men were watching me for the last few days. And after that, for the remainder of the year, my mom picked me up on time every day. Whew. So here's the thing, nothing actually happened except for that moment where one of the men asked to sit at my table while I was at McDonald's. And I think that nothing happened because of my ability to pick up on small gestures, behaviors, body language, eye contact, and that deep sense of fear and anxiety that I got from the things that I was observing. So, if I would have ignored these feelings, Like, let's say, for example, I allowed that man to sit at the table and I didn't get up and leave. I'm sure this would be a different story. But my body was giving me all of the cues that something was wrong, and I listened to it. And even if I was wrong about the entire situation, it doesn't matter because I didn't stay to find out. I also just want to add that it's not always possible to leave unsafe situations. So, thank goodness in that moment, my nervous system had the capacity to get up and leave. But there can be times where some nervous systems don't have the capacity and they go into freeze. And so I I also just want to say that this isn't a reflection of me as a person, but just a reflection of the capacity that my nervous system had at the time. And I think that when we experience trauma, especially as girls and women, we may ignore those feelings. And we ignore those feelings because trauma disrupts our ability to trust ourselves and our bodily cues. And if we've been taught to be nice or polite, right, as girls and women, we're often taught to just be nice, just be polite, say the right thing, just agree, then that just adds another layer to it. So, to wrap up this episode, I want to invite you to always honor yourself if you have the capacity by removing yourself from a situation if it feels unsafe, even if you're wrong. Don't try to analyze it or talk yourself out of it. If the alarms in your body are going off, then something is off. And it's not your job to stay and find out to see if you're right or wrong. The more that you honor yourself and you listen to your bodily cues, the more safety you create in your nervous system and the more self-trust that you create. Thank you for listening to my experience. I appreciate you, and I hope that you can take something away from this episode. Next week, I'll be sharing part 2 of Trusting Your Intuition and talking more about how this next experience led me to only work with women in my private practice. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you absolutely loved this episode, I would so appreciate it if you subscribed and left a review on Apple Podcast, or take a screenshot and share this episode on social media. Don't forget to tag me at tatiana.holistic.coach. The more nervous systems we reach, the more generational cycles we break, and the more we contribute to a kinder and safer world. And if you're looking for somatic healing services, send me a DM and I'd love to chat on how I can support you. I'll see you in the next episode.